All right, and so we are back, and I'm going to even be open and honest for all the listeners. This is the first time that I didn't hit record on the podcast. You and I went back and forth. I loved it. I was just thinking that I was going to sit down and do the intro right after we got done with the interview, and I was like, there's no interview. So here we are, and you were gracious enough to come back on, and I think, we covered so much ground that I think we're going to have just as much fun, if not more fun, because I just got done listening to a webinar that you guys did with, I think you had, 250, 300 people on
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
So for the listeners who are not familiar with you, Illum, your story, because they did not hear the first try at this, let's give them a backdrop of you, how you ended up becoming an entrepreneur, what Illum does, and then we can kind of dive into how you've tied in what you're doing as an entrepreneur, your passions with the customers, your business model, and then like kind of the future strategies that you want to take with the business.
All right. We'll talk about all the things. I'm excited to chat with you again. Honestly, I was a little excited when you told me we didn't record because I got to talk to you again, which is always so fun. So fun. Anyway, I'll start with Illum. So Illum is a research consultancy that operates in the sort of spirit or vein of a management consultancy, but we support the energy industry, specifically the clean energy industry and the electric grid. We also work in natural gas services as well. But if you think about all of the various services that supply electricity or electric and gas power to households and businesses, we support on what folks call the demand side. So we look at the human dimensions of what's driving power demand, and how that integrates with clean energy objectives and climate mitigation objectives. So Illum is a consultancy of, I think we have about 32 people now, spanning social scientists to data scientists. So we have anthropologists, sociologists, urban planners, engineers, data scientists, statisticians, mathematicians, physicists, who all work.
So really, really uneducated people, right?
Totally uneducated people.
Right.
Everyone's just winging it. But, our team essentially contributes to our clients' problems, but our goal is to look at things from the human's perspective. And I know that might sound a little odd to folks who work in, say, consumer products where everything is human-centric. When you think about the energy world, so much is about systems and supplies, massive grid infrastructure development, power plant building, all of these things. And often the consumer, the user, is only looked at in the form of demand statistics and not in terms of their needs. And so Illum was founded with a goal of centering the dreams and aspirations of humans in our energy challenges so that we can all benefit from a clean energy and just energy transition. And that comes in part from my background. So just to give you a little history on myself and also my business partner, Sarah.
Before we do that, Anne, can you?
Yeah, sure.
Because this is going to tie in, just for a little bit more context, because I think this will weave in and out of the entire episode. Is so specifically, a lot of anybody that's listening in is familiar with paying their electric bill or their gas bill, right? So
Sure.
When you say because I've read you when you and I sparked up the conversation at the boot camp and we started talking, and I was like, oh my God, I should probably just get taught by Anne about what's going on out there. We talked about the book, The Grid. Mm-hmm. How haphazard it was created, et cetera. So a lot of people are used to just paying their bill and not having any interaction. It's so out there. So when you talk about the human side of this, and because there's a lot of components to the human side of who's consuming this. So maybe kind of give maybe a practical example of when you're saying, okay, what do you mean by the human side? How are you changing the behavior? And then how are you lining up with your customers, who are the big, huge, energy companies who are supplying this?
Oh man, do we have a couple hours to get through this? This utility or service that we're also used to that's so ubiquitous has so much going on behind the curtain. So you turn on the light switch and your lights come on, but behind the scenes there are system planners, regulators, utilities, and all these different actors who are essentially charged with making sure that your lights stay on, or that every time you turn that light switch on, that you get the power that you're looking for. And generally speaking, they're quite successful. But one of the things that we do is we look at how consumer behavior collectively has an impact on the demand of the electric grid. And we look to help our utility clients identify technologies and solutions that make that demand easier to manage. So what we can't have, generally speaking, are people all using power at the same time. We can't supply that. We can't onboard major technologies like electric vehicles without having a whole system plan behind that to make sure that enough power is supplied to those new technologies. Every electric vehicle is the equivalent, essentially, of powering a single family home or a small single family home. So you can imagine you're like doubling neighborhoods once everybody gets on board with electric vehicles, which we hope will happen. It's important for a lot of reasons, but that does require so much thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So our team looks at this from a number of different perspectives. One is, what will consumers expect and what do they need? And how will that improve the quality of their lives? And how might we develop technologies and solutions, things as like as simple as, say, smart thermostats that kind of orchestrate power across multiple houses, if you will, to things as complicated as electric vehicles or distributed generation and solar, and how do we plan for that? And then we also will look at the impacts of those technologies and services in aggregate on the electric grid, so that those people who are trying to determine how much power should be supplied at any given moment can factor in all of these human behaviors into their planning. It's a really precise science. You're really, as a power planner, trying to thread the needle between, onboarding these very expensive on-demand power plants that burn coal, that burn electric gas, with what we hope to be an increasing volume of renewable power, battery power, and all of this has to be managed considering
Perfectly.
the supply. Perfectly,
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
and it's so, and just for like, again, I'll maybe dumb it down to like that was perfect, but like from my own perspective, like why you and I were talking about this when I read the book The Grid, they were talking about like, and I never knew this. You flip on the light switch, that power is immediately coming from somewhere else. Like power isn't just stored anywhere. And there was like some stat, I'm going to totally butcher, but like if Elon Musk built the biggest battery powered whatever, like $10 billion in this battery, it would only hold like the backup power for like 4 hours of like the city. So you're like, okay, it's immediately coming from somewhere, and how well this has to be managed. And I think how for granted we all take what we have. And that's kind of tying when you're saying consumers, it's just the American life.
Yeah.
How does that relate with energy? And then how do we make all this stuff, this ties so well into this episode of conscious capitalism, building value for all the stakeholders. What an amazing topic to be able to do in that. And again, this has to be almost like broken down because people, it's almost like, what's the stupid analogy of the fish don't even know there's water because they're breathing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to explain like, this is what we're so used to that we're not even used to like talking about it.
Oh, absolutely. People have almost a mythical relationship to electricity. It's just sort of part of our lives. And, and I joke that people think it comes from God. Like they just have no sense of all these systems, that are enabling this. And honestly, I think a lot of the work that we do sort of on the political side of this doesn't do a good job of conveying those things. Not that facts are necessarily the easiest thing for the public to absorb, but I don't think we tell the story well.
Yeah, we don't. Concepts.
Yeah, we don't tell the story well. So that's also something we support with, communication campaigns and figuring out how to translate what all these actors are trying to do into communication strategies that motivate people to take action.
Yeah, like no easy task.
No.
So that goes back to when I interjected about some of the examples of your and Sarah's journey to how you got to here. You mentioned on the previous conversation that we had about some of your background of why you became an entrepreneur, and then how you got into this business, and then how that your theme, weaving together conscious capitalism into what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I should say I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I never set out to be one. When we were talking last time, I shared I grew up in a little post-industrial town in southern Michigan called Battle Creek, Michigan, which is Cereal City, USA. And we even had a cereal queen every year to that would show up at the world's largest breakfast table, which was pretty gross in retrospect when you think about sort of the amount of dairy involved with serving that quantity of cornflakes. But anyway, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when a lot of the jobs that were prevalent in our community were going away. And the community changed really dramatically, as did a number of small industrial towns in the Rust Belt in the Midwest during that time. And so I grew up in an environment where a lot of people around me were living in poverty, or whose family members didn't have reliable jobs, or people were really living on the edge. And I joke with friends that I thought I was wealthy because I had STEMware and my family had college degrees, but my dad was a social worker and my mom was, public school teacher. I just had no concept of what it meant to, one, run a business, or what it meant to run a business that was run in what I would consider to be an ethical way. Because all of the businesses that I was seeing, at least the big businesses, were taking jobs away from our community and having detrimental effects to it. Oh, and then behind that, a number of different temporary labor companies and positions came in, but people were left without benefits, left without job security, and were often let go before they were required to be hired full time. So I went to school really trying to unpack the impacts of economic disinvestment in the Midwest and deindustrialization, and how that affects public health and well-being. And so I spent my undergraduate and my graduate career in sociology and anthropology trying to look at these challenges, these economic challenges, from the perspectives of humans. What I didn't realize, and this will surprise no one, but it surprised me, that leaving my graduate degree, I was this sort of like unicorn of a person who had a lot of interests in looking at macroeconomic trends, but I wasn't an economist. And I was really interested in public health outcomes, but I wasn't an epidemiologist. And so no one knew what to do with me. And I moved into applied research, frankly, because I needed to make money. I was never a kid who had the benefit of taking unpaid internships. And so I can't even tell you the number of ridiculous jobs that I've held, from like corn detasseling to, wearing, this one, right? To wearing like a lion suit to promote coffee for a weird cafe, and, but I would do what it took to pay my bills. But I moved into consumer product research. So I worked with a company that applied ethnographic research, so anthropologists, to go into stores and physical environments and observe people making decisions. And then we would supply that information to Fortune 100 companies.
So interesting.
It's so compelling. I had no idea, again, talk about like sort of opening the curtains, if you will, or like, looking behind the scenes. I had no idea how much money goes into just orchestrating our every behavior in the retail environments. And I was just one part of that.
Shelf space, shelf spots, graphics.
Yes, all of it, the whole thing. And anyway, I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years, and kind of hustled hard to get from being one of those in-field observers, kind of watching people sneakily in like the Safeway or the Vons supermarket,
to being lion suit.
I wasn't in a lion suit then.
I know.
but I have been in the past. But to being a manager in that space. And I think once I got my managerial experience kind of running field projects throughout the United States, I decided I needed to do something that was more directly in line with my values. So that solved one interest, right, which was applying the social science background to be human behavior. But it didn't align with my values per se. Like if I was going to spend all of that time, education, and energy in thinking about how to motivate human behavior, I wanted to do it in a pro-social way. So I started working in energy. And at the time, I was one of those people who thought energy came from God. Like I just had no idea where these resources came from. But I entered the energy industry at a time when system planners, engineers, policymakers were starting to ask themselves, well, how does human behavior relate to all of this? And was fortunate to build a career and an expertise as someone really focused on human behavior and the human dimensions of energy pretty quickly. And then after about 5 years of really intense consulting work, I decided with my business partner, Sarah, to strike out on our own. And that's its own whole set of stories that I'm sure we'll get to. But that's generally my history and path.
So, and I love this because as you and I were, because a couple of the pillars to this conversation are, one is how did you get into this space of where you are? Because like conscious capitalism, meaning like, hey, we're going to try and do good by everybody and make money. right? And,
Mhm.
and infuse that. And we'll talk about the correlations behind that and how you've done it. So you've covered like, which I think is great with the context of how you got into the space that you're at, which has a direct impact of, doing good by everybody. And then then what I want to unpack too, and is how you integrate that into your culture with your employees, and then also
Yeah.
to your customers, and then how you're actually making money on this. Because just to make sure we touched on some of the things that we talked about last time, is you and I had this conversation of like, you have this ability to do good, which a lot of people think is for or non for profit, right? We're going to
Mhm.
raise money from the people that made all the money to then go do good. But then there's business over here where you just solve for the highest dollar amount. And until I had gone through and read the book Conscious Capitalism and gone down this rabbit hole over the years, you can do both. And
Mhm.
you've been doing that and intentionally growing. So you have choices behind this. And I think it's just interesting when you're talking about, you know, just one small story and to then explain to you how you built the actual culture and the operations of your business, but is like in the human behavior, when you talked about how human consumers go into stores and make decisions, and like what you said, like you wanted to start a business that aligns with your values. I don't know if you consciously or unconsciously did that, where like I've watched where people learn about, like, let's say food, like we know that certain shit kills us, right?
Right.
Period. Like
Yep.
that's super scientific, right? That statement. and and then
And
like
totally.
the moment that you realize this as a business, you shouldn't be solving to sell more of it. I don't
Right.
know. That's just a
Yeah,
human
exactly.
behavior thing. And so I'm breaking it down to like what you were talking about of like, okay, these big businesses, like I'm not arguing with capitalism. It's like, but the moment that you realize that something kills someone, why should you sell more of it? Like
Mhm.
someone should stop doing that shit. And so
Mhm.
like it's
Yeah.
about like what you're talking about is how to take human behavior and not to manipulate that to sell bad things to them that are cheap to make more profits. It's about doing good and making money all around. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
kind of layer in that you and I are both capitalists at heart, and then there's a way to do all of this. And
Yeah.
then
No, absolutely.
take that into your business and like, okay, like, because there's a lot of stuff that your upbringing brought into of like why you created the culture and the operations that you're working with.
Sure. Well, Sarah and I were both working at a consultancy that, in a lot of ways, is a great job. We were young parents at the time, working 50 to 60 hours a week in in the energy field, doing what we loved, but in this way that felt really unsustainable. I myself had a 2.5-year-old daughter, had, you know, was literally traveling with her to give talks and give presentations at times, or, once she was too old for that, coming home and, trying to cram in all of this sort of important social time and then working into the evenings to get my job done. And, Sarah and I stepped back from what this kind of hustle looked like, felt like. And this is really typical for management consultancies. You pay people salaries for 40-hour work weeks, you work them 60, you're making money hand over fist. And we started doing, just kind of running analysis, both on our standard rates, our multipliers, and what we needed for ourselves. And so at the heart of that was, we really wanted to bring forward what I would call a more feminist model to business, but also, put another way, is a really family centric model or human centric model, which basically says, you know, anyone can be successful in a job and career by doing excellent work when they show up to work, but also should have I don't even want to say luxury, the right to go home and be with their family and be with the people that they love, right? I mean, we don't work just to work. you know, we don't work to just work more, build more, earn more. Well, some people do, but that's not necessarily why I was working, why I wanted to work, and it wasn't what Sarah wanted to be doing. So we felt like we could build a model essentially from the bill rates that we were developing that provided comprehensive benefits, that provided unlimited vacation time, that provided really progressive for a small company healthcare and insurance policies, life insurance, while also trying to honor people's personal lives. And we've been quite successful at that. One of the reasons why I call this sort of a feminist model, and we're seeing this all over the news right now, is that women, for better or worse, bear the brunt of domestic labor. And the pandemic has only exemplified that. It's forcing so many women out of the workplace simply because, absent school systems, absent childcare, someone has to pick up the slack. And so that typically falls to women. And we as a company saw so many women who are exceptionally talented being, if not forced out of the workforce, overlooked in their professional development because of these standard expectations in management consulting, which is essentially, the endless hustle, right, to the top. And so we thought also this model will solve for a talent gap in a way that we face in our industry as well, where we need more thinkers. We need, as I've explained to you, highly specialized folks to work. Yeah, really smart people to work on these problems. But so many really smart people, and particularly in our industry, women, were not getting the jobs that they deserved, in part because of their demands in their homes. And so we really wanted to create an environment where you could advance based on your ability to get the work done in the time that you committed to, not just in terms of sheer volume of work. So,
well, I was gonna say, and there's a couple of things that I want to kind of peel back in that, because it's like I think that there's like a mindset shift as we're talking about conscious capitalism, the things that you're discussing.
mm-hmm.
There's this preconceived notion that there's give and take, right? So like you either have to solve for the highest dollar amount and like consume everything in your path to do that, or you have to give these benefits that people don't deserve, and that like brings entitlement and all this, because like you have to like break down those beliefs. I think, because like what you're discussing is now starting to, like, with the data, and there's some people that are on the show, but like you have more productive people, you have
Mm-hmm.
higher margins, you have the ability to charge more. So like this isn't just giving up money to do these kind of things. And I think what's crazy too is like I mean, I have a wife who's working, and we have twin girls that are 4. Like they love her. Like they've been sick, and with what's going on, like they've been home, and like for sure they just consume more of her time. So then I have to do more logistics around the house and all. Like, so we're a team, and it's still freaking hard. So it's like
impossible.
she was 10 times smarter than me. I mean, it still is, like, way. So she's so valuable to the workforce, but then there's this constraint that you're talking about where, like, it's so interesting, because I was having this, and this is one of the conversations that you and I had to tee back over to you, is this is I don't know where the breakdown was, where employees had to be cogs.
Yeah.
Whereas in like, hey, if you solve for this, if you're selfish and greedy, you would actually do what you're talking about, because companies that are doing what you're talking about actually outperform.
Yeah.
So like, I just wanted to break down some of those things so I can tee it back up to you to explain what you're doing, to say that you're not just giving things away and creating entitlement, because I think there's a lot of that for some reason.
Yeah. I think we've been told a story over the course of our lives that that people don't deserve to live well. That like that it's assumed that you have to, quote unquote, earn everything that you get, but that somehow working a standard job equals having not earned that. Like you have to be extra shiny, extra special to get those things. And I think that's a really convenient myth for people who are looking to consolidate power and consolidate capital. But that said, I mean, to your point, we are doing exceptionally well as a company. We grew from 2 people to 32 people in 7 years. Our revenue is commensurate with that. We maintain profit margins between 14 and 30%, depending on the year. And Sarah and I have built a company that has an ethos and a brand that is palpable. People know us when they see us. They can feel our work, and they want to back us. I mean, the other thing that I realized as we were building this company, and Sarah as well, was that most of our clients now were our peers, right? They're coming from the same generation, living with the same frustrations about the workforce, and looking to invest in and identify alternative ways of being that supported people's whole lives. And there is a real generational shift in terms of what people are willing to accept for their lives. And we found that our clients wanted us because they wanted to support our values, right? They believed in what we were doing. But more than that, our work product is exceptional. We deliver very rigorous research and thoughtful and insightful research, and we surround it with important storytelling and graphic designs, and provide our clients with content that allows them to communicate with their executives and their senior management, and it makes them look good ultimately. But reputationally, I would say that we're considered on par with all of the other consultancies we could have worked for, and that we couldn't have imagined competing against when we launched, and ended up becoming real contenders, to them.
Well, I just think too, like when you think about, like, I'm curious on, like, for the recruiting strategies, or like how you're
Yeah.
maintaining this balance of the culture, where, like, at what point does someone say, like, this is ridiculous? You know how many times I've talked to people that are, like, in their prime right now, before COVID, they're working at Accenture or KPMG, traveling all over the
Yeah.
place, making gobs of money, and hate their lives.
Oh, yeah.
Too many people that have been on this show that are worth insane amounts of money, and then they realize, like, it's not about the money. I can't just sit on a board and get things done. So, like,
Yeah.
by able to, like, have the operations that you have in the culture, like, you're able to attract people that can get shit done faster and better and smarter, and they attract better clients. And I don't know, it just seems
Yeah.
like a no-brainer to me, and it's hard to,
Well,
like.
it is. It is a no-brainer, and maybe it's a no-brainer for us because we are. I think we're sort of the same generation as well in that way. But the reality is that, yeah, I think you hit. I just hit middle age. At 40 is middle age, where
Hey, Buffett's
where
90, so that you're still in the below 50% mark.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I will be Warren Buffett by the time I'm 90. But anyway, I think there's this point where you start to reckon with what you're doing, and you spend your 20s and your 30s. If you're someone like me who doesn't, come from a trust fund, or doesn't come from a lot of backing, you're really just trying to get that financial security, right? Just to get yourself to a place where you're contributing to your 401k, you're developing a savings, you are building a home, you're building a family. And then, and then you kind of look up and you realize, well, what do I actually need? Like, how much do I need, as you said? And for me, I had my own little wake up call that I didn't share with you last time. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was diagnosed with a really low grade form of ovarian cancer,
Ooh.
which, as you can imagine, as a parent with twins, was like by far the single most terrifying thing that had ever happened to me. And I was lucky insofar as the kind that I had wasn't prone to malignancy, so I didn't have to go through any extreme treatments or anything like that. But I did spend the first 2 years of my early parenthood going to oncologists every 4 weeks or whatever it was, not 4 weeks, every 3 to 4 months. And that, I think, really shifted my perspective on what I wanted my life to be like, but also forced me to assess how I was living. Because, leading up to that, I was traveling all the time. And not to say, I should be clear, after starting a loom, I don't want people to think that I wasn't also then traveling all the time. But to be clear, I mean, that's just part of being an owner. But I knew that sort of the stresses of living in ways that weren't fully aligned with my values were causing harm to me physically. And I wouldn't say that, like, my job gave me low grade cancer, but I would say that whatever this low grade cancer was made me realize all of the ways in which my job was not making me healthier.
Hmm.
Right? And so right now, I'm also living a life where I am, going to my personal trainer 3 to 4 days a week, lifting weights, playing roller derby. Well, I used to play roller derby. I don't anymore. But doing all these things that were fun for me, right? That were fulfilling for me as an individual as well. And so when I was talking to a friend about creating a loom and kind of explaining the process, my friend said to me, Anne, you created the home that you needed for yourself in your business. You created the safe space that you needed as a business owner to live the life you needed to lead and live. And you created that space for others as well. And so I thought that was a really kind of interesting way of framing it. And I'd never thought about it that way before, but she was completely right. We wanted to create a space where, again, people could live these full lives. And the commitment that we have from our employees in doing that, the transparency that we provide them to keep them committed, and our constant reassessing, self-assessing, and readjusting as leaders I think creates this sort of feeling that we are in a way a family, that we're all in it together, that we're all building this house, if you will, that is a loom together. And even though Sarah and I kind of put up the framing when we launched, based on our own needs, we very much created a team by being very forward with our values and forward with our mission that is building it alongside us now. So it doesn't feel extractive. We don't have anyone on our team who is, as I think a lot of business owners will claim, these employees or cogs that are just sort of sucking from them and not contributing, right? Because I think that's the adversarial view of owners to employees. But the reality is that they're co-conspirators with us. We are co-conspiring to create better services, to create a better planet, through really trying to tackle challenges of climate change. And then the other piece that we focus a lot on at Illum is on questions of equity and making sure that that all people sort of benefit from this clean energy transition that we're working toward. But anyway, I said a lot, but I think that the reality is that I think when you live against your values, you live with your values, you live true to your values, it doesn't necessarily have to come into conflict with earning money. In fact, you can leverage, capitalism, you can leverage your business to enhance your values and to project those values into the world. And I hope that people who are listening to this recognize that it's not an either or situation, that you can do both. You just have to abandon some of these common myths about how it needs to be done. If I had gone to B school, I'd be in a different place.
If you had gone to what?
At business school, I'd probably be in a different place.
In what way do you think?
Sarah and I started our business knowing a lot about what we do, but not a lot about the standard tenets of business. Right.
Well, and we can unpack that, but too, because I think this is, as we talk about taking your entrepreneurial why into conscious capitalism, into intentional growth, and what you said about using your business to leverage your values and what you want and to make an impact. Again, there's this, I think if you would have gone to business school, I think the last 40 plus years since Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman.
Karl Marx is way further back.
Yeah. Like different timelines. Milton Friedman, we're going to optimize for the shareholder at all expense. It's just ridiculous. I love money too, but when Jack Stack was on the show and he's like, he saved $100 million in cash over the last decade to prepare for this with an employee-owned company. That's called true capitalism. And so when I think about what you have to, it's prudent to create a sustainable business, but all these things are possible. You know what I mean? And I think that's the crazy part, that we if the people in business school who only think that that's the way, it truly, what you're talking about not only makes sense from all the people that have been on the show, and we're so much money people have made, and then they're still upset. And they literally sell their business to then try and figure out where to put that money that aligns with their values, which generally is not as leverageable. It's in a Schwab, ETF diversified portfolio with one financial advisor or family office, versus having employees and companies and customers that you can directly impact because of the machine you built. I just think about how, maybe you can spend some time talking about, as you and Sarah have shifted your mindset and what you're doing with the business to make sure the business is sustainable, and how you're going to be tackling the equity in your clients' lives, but your family and your employees. How are you tying all these things together?
Really easily, with no work whatsoever.
No internal conflict. It's
no internal conflict, any of those things. I think one of the most humbling things about being a business owner is that you're in a constant state of learning. You don't get to be an expert. What you get to be is somebody who is committed to building something valuable, right? And for us, value has multiple dimensions. In terms of, the finances, Sarah and I grew, we doubled in size almost year over year until the past few years, when that, of course, changes dramatically. Going from, 5 to 10 is really different than going from 30 to 60, right? And so right now we're sitting at this size where we know we want to grow more. And one of the challenges that we're facing is that we have to really align our roles and develop the sort of hierarchies necessary to effectively maintain our profit margins and to deliver really great quality product to our team. And so what that looks like for us is developing key areas of responsibility for every single one of our employees at different levels. Being very clear on our expectations, being very clear on our benefits, being transparent about where we're at financially, setting clear billability goals that are paired with a clear understanding of people's benefits and packages and how they can and cannot take advantage of those benefits over time. And then also making sure that our team in some ways is almost as versed on the financials of our company as we are. I mean, the reality is that we have a team of incredibly smart people. And I would say this is true for any business, whether or not you have a bunch of PhDs working for you, is that, people need to be clear on what goals you're working toward. And I think the financials are part of that. And one of the things that that I appreciate about being transparent around our financials is it gets everybody on board. It weeds out people who disagree with your economic philosophy or what you're trying to do. Because if you disagree, you disagree. You can find a home elsewhere. We're fine with that, But then it also, as business owners, keeps us really focused on what we're trying to achieve because it creates both an intrinsic and extrinsic accountability system for building this company. And our goal is to grow and remain profitable enough that we can profit share at the end of every year, which we do into people's 401ks. And the aim there is essentially to share the wealth, that we are generating as a company with the team who helps us generate it. As we look into the future, thinking about what we'll do for this, the second half of our lives, thinking about what's going to happen to Illume is central to that question. And it is something that Sarah and I think about all the time. We've built this legacy of a company that is reputable, values our employees, is again working towards good and is highly profitable. So how do we continue to build and grow that in alignment with our values, and then think about strategies for Sarah and I to do different things with our lives, into the future as well. And as we talked, we have no intention of selling. The question of how we grow and how we create a highly profitable and maintain a highly profitable company is really central to just creating a healthy business so that we can, while we're still owners of the company, redistribute those benefits back to our team.
Well, you covered on something too, and that I don't think we brought it up, but you went to the boot camp in was it February, March, right before the world flipped over? But
it was literally just before. I remember someone in our boot camp was sneezing, and I think things had just been
back when it was not a big deal to sneeze.
Well, right, but things were going on in Wuhan and Europe, and I remember thinking, oh man.
Yeah, it's like the shutter that starts to flap right before the tornado. But the reason we bring this up is because our material, the listeners that have been following me for years, just really getting rid of the word exit. I talked to Bo Burlingham recently about this because it's not about selling, but it's about understanding the value of your business so you can tie all the things that you want together. And you were the literally the catalyst to us rebranding everything. You're like, I want to go because I want to dive into value and strategic planning, but I'm not planning on selling. And finally, where it's like, it's just about being intentional. You have to understand the end result, because I think you are like the spitting image of like the people that I want to make sure understand this. So when you think about why you've built Illume, what you're doing for your employees, what you're doing for your customers, what you're doing for an archaic industry, the energy sector of all sectors, to just take and build this, machine that just cranks out billing people at 60 hours and you're paying them for 40, to just hand this off to someone to cash out and then have all of that go away because it's just about the money. It's just different. So now when you think about like being intentional behind this, how does the things that you've been learning, how does that tie into what you want for the business? Because I think that's the biggest misnomer, is that you just have to sell, but you can continue to do what you can accomplish a lot of your goals, I believe, if you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I really loved about the boot camp, aside from just how clearly you and Pat just bring your values so forward and communicating and teaching this information. I mean, you both are so inspiring, and I just loved being in the room with you because there was so much energy. And you guys have so much energy. It's so wonderful. And I think even Pat at a couple times almost brought me to tears when he was talking about his ESOP and being able to sell it. But one of the things that I found as an owner, well, there were really two things. One was with respect to the company. So thinking about the value of the company is thinking about the metrics for health, right? A highly valuable company is a very healthy company. And so understanding how we think about the value of a loom helps us understand where we need to optimize the company to perform better and to perform more optimally. We also, I think, just understood what our options were. That in some ways there are lots of ways to hand your company to someone else. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving up or dismantling everything that you created, and that can be anything from, say, handing it to your employees, turning it into an ESOP, to finding strategic partnerships where you're strategically aligning not just on what you do, but how you do it, how you do the work. The other piece was just the things I needed to understand for myself personally. What I loved also that you guys did was you really looked at it from the vantage point of the owner as well. For entrepreneurs like myself, Sarah and I, where we're, first time business owners, we're, running our own company, this company that we're building ourselves. There are so many considerations that, that we just haven't factored into our own personal financial planning. So I'm so financially conservative that I really ignore the business as an asset when I do my own planning for the future. I'm not banking on it being worth anything or being able to exit in a big payout, because I want to make sure that, that my investments are stacked according to that, metric, versus assuming I'm going to sell the company and be able to retire on that.
Banking it the other way around.
Yeah, banking it the other way around, which gets a lot of people into a
being
lot of
completely
trouble.
wrong with the value of it.
Yeah, or just assuming that that you'll be able to sell it. You never know. You never know. The economies are changing rapidly right now. But the other piece is actually looking at it as an asset and taking it seriously as an asset and thinking about what it means to have it and to own it and to guard that asset was really useful. And that really came down to all these different ways of thinking about how we value it and how we think about, optimizing across all these different elements of the business that contribute to the valuation. And I just found that so insightful, and it really prompted a lot of changes for us as owners, both in terms of how we think about our books, but also how we think about aligning our team and how we think about building out the infrastructure at our new size, with this sort of new level of power that we have as a company, to be able to sustain itself, in the next 15 years or so.
Well, I think what you've done is the work that you went through when you said that you kind of recalibrated the structure of the business because you're having a visceral reaction against how you're running or how you're running your life, or if what you were doing day to day was not adhering to your core values. It's like you have to learn all the different ways it's going to unfold, so that way your chance of setting up a loom to continue to impact your customers' lives, to continue to impact your employees' lives while you make money, you have to understand that to be able to connect the dots. Otherwise, it's just going to just randomly happen to you. And
Yeah.
you and I talked about, if you were to be sitting down, or if you're a listener and you're a listener or somewhere in the journey of that entrepreneurial phase, and they're like, okay, I want what you have, right? But I'm running a business and the employees are cogs, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, that's kind of the standard way, but we have this machine. I want to start to align my values with, the greater good, or be able to do these things. What do you say to the person that is scared of okay, there might be some fundamental changes I have to have in my business or who I am in order to do more of the conscious capitalist
Mm-hmm.
approach? I don't know if you remember I was talking about this.
Yeah, we did talk about this a bit. I don't know if I'll give you the same answer I gave you before, but I'll give you one. I think a lot of it is just beginning by listening to yourself and being really clear about where those disconnects occur, as you know, as you kind of said, for myself personally, when it felt like there was this way in which the things I was doing day to day were grinding against, if you will, there was all this
Hmm.
friction with my values and the things that I wanted to manifest in the world.
Can you describe what that friction felt like? So if someone's going like, what does that actually mean to you?
Oh man, I feel like it shows up in all of these ways. It shows up physically in the form of fatigue. It shows up in, I feel like you can almost feel it in your muscles or your bones, and you kind of, at the end of your day, you just like drop into bed and you're spent, and not because you feel like you worked hard, but because you're just drained. And I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of that draining comes from a disconnect, an emotional
Hmm.
or spiritual, depending on how you think about the world, um, disconnect, right? I think it comes down to making decisions that you regret, moving in a direction that feels like it's not well aligned with your values. One of the things that, I'll just give an example, that I was looking to sort of remedy was how I treated my subcontractors. Making sure that I honored them more as partners and not as people who sort of get out of the picture as soon as we won the contract, so that we as a company could get more money from that contract. And as a small business, you realize really quickly, like, those relationships are important to honor, because they're the sort of foundation on which you build your reputation, but also that you create these mutually reinforcing relationships throughout the duration of your business, right? So that's like one example of like a small
Hmm.
thing that I was sort of pressured to do in previous work, that I needed to resolve to feel like I was operating ethically, in my life, right? And all those things take a toll, and I think that you start to really feel it. But once you take the time to step back from that and listen to yourself, and I think the other part is listening to your team. If you're This assumes you're already in it, like you already have a business and you have a team. Listening to those people who support your livelihood and support your well-being by showing up to work every day, listening to what they need and what would be valuable to them, because sometimes it can be very simple. A lot of times what people want is so small relative to what it costs you, or rather what it costs you is so small to relative to what they gain. So it could be, a few more breaks in the day. It could be, a lunch that you bring in occasionally. It could be creating time for people to volunteer at organizations they love, but finding ways to kind of infuse your company with those needs, and to really respect that people are showing up and choosing to be a part of your company every single day, and that they have
A
choices.
choice, right?
It's a
They don't
choice.
they don't have to work for you, right? Well, and
No.
what's interesting is for any business, whether it's manufacturing, e-commerce, or consulting, like yours, when you, I believe that a lot, what allows some of this to take place. I'm curious on how after, or how you've gone through this, is like when you're solving for annual income, like quarterly profits, annual net income, and like you're gonna solve like all the ripple of decisions from, like you said, like, what do you do with your subcontractors? Like, do you let them deal with the mess up or not? Do you treat them like humans or not? Versus the long-term value of your company. But like, you can, like, if you're solving for this year, you're gonna end up just the damage of relationships versus the
Yeah.
other way around. And when you've kind of gone through this shift in the mindset, how does that help? And how have you started looking at metrics, or versus like the grinding away of, pay them for 40, bill them for 60, like that, compared to long-term value? How is that, how's that theme getting changed, or how is that integrated into your business?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say that we are in the process of establishing formal metrics around it. Most of our way of sort of testing whether or not we're moving in the right direction is looking at our revenue, looking at our books and how we're performing, and then checking in constantly with our team. How are you doing? Are you well? How's your family? And it's solving for, like, in moments like this, all of the insanity that life brings to your business, by creating frameworks and space for people to be creative. So, for example, we always tend to our books. We have clear goals. We have clear profitability metrics. And everybody in our company has clear billability expectations and standards, and we check in around those things all the time. But the things that are intangible that keep our employees with us, is, developing parent guides for the pandemic and thinking about how people can be healthy and well when in quarantine and when they are suddenly homeschooling all of their children and also having to work, and connecting them to resources, connecting them to ideas, connecting them to solves that will help them get through that period. Rather than just setting the standard, we expect you to achieve billability at this level, irrespective of what's going on in your life. And we do have to maintain that standard to keep the company healthy. But in order to help people meet that standard, we then have to buoy them with resources that allow them to optimize their own family lives in order to show up for us. So the metrics, I think it's less about metrics as it is about conversations, if you will. Like, our books are in constant conversation with our team. We are in constant conversation with our team, and our team is in constant conversation with the world that they live in. And if we're not sort of tending to all of those things, then we aren't creating an environment that people can thrive in. Another example of that is a lot of the sort of racial injustice and unrest that's happening right now. If we don't acknowledge that within our business, then we are failing to recognize what our communities are dealing with right now, and a lot of our employees, and particularly our employees of color. So how do we bring that into conversation as a business so that we're honoring the lives that people are living and committing repeatedly to doing better as leaders while we're optimizing our books?
And that kind of, you covered, kind of the wind of the sixth power of the conscious capitalism, all the stakeholders.
Yeah.
You're talking about because you're making the difference for the customers of your customers, so the normal consumer, your employees, then your shareholders, you and Sarah. And so I'm curious, now that you've articulated this for yourself, what impact do you want to make using these resources and leveraging these resources? What is the ultimate goal, and how you want to impact, the world with Illum? And then how can you, what are some of the things that you're going to take in to make sure that you're having the highest probability of success for that?
Oh man.
I mean, again, I don't even know if you want to, I know that was a deep question, but I'm just curious because,
No, I love it. It's a good question.
it's so in line with who you are that you've probably trying to figure out, how do you keep that feeling, right? Because you're optimizing for that feeling to not feel the friction. We've articulated the resources that you have to keep that. So what are the things that you're, what are the systems you're using to keep that true to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, within Illum, I mean, a lot of it's empowering more of our team members to build the mission and vision, and bringing more people up in leadership so that Sarah and I aren't as central to maintaining that vision. For me personally, it's honestly the question that I'm living through, like walking through right now, but I keep coming back to wanting to create more environments and support other people in creating environments like Illum, so that more individuals, more families can live with this sort of financial security and autonomy necessary to thrive in this country. And as government is stepping back from providing support services and basic provisions for people living in poverty or even middle class Americans, businesses have to step forward as the arbiters of what it means to have a good life. It is precisely the ethics of business, and as business owners, that are in some ways serving as the moral compass for this moment, right? They're the ones who are intervening. So how do we create more businesses that aim to intervene in these ways, that aim to support the social good, the public good, and to do that in a way that is pro-employee, pro-community, pro-environment, pro-economic and racial justice? How do we create those businesses? And I know that there are so many businesses and business owners out there who want to do all of these things. And then the question is, how do we enable that and empower that? And again, begin to rebuild a lot of these communities, like the community I came from, that is still has still not recovered from the devastation of the 70s and 80s. Is still trying to figure out how to create sustainable businesses there. So that's my really modest goal for the
Well, it's
next
awesome.
40
And so
years.
how do we create more, and then which is the point of this interview, right? Which is about describing to others that you can align and integrate all of these different components. So what do you think is the most important factor in accomplishing this? Like, or the biggest challenge in getting more businesses out there to do these things?
I really think that we need to unpack them and rewrite the mythology around business and what businesses does and what it's for and who it serves. I think that's really critical to making sure that we create capital, as you said, sort of conscious capital that that betters our lives. I mean, the reality is we need well paid from a purely selfish, predominantly capitalistic perspective, and any economist with their eyes open will say this: we need a consumer base in order to support these businesses, and they have to have money in their pockets, and they have to be healthy and well in order to spend to buy these products to continue to build this economy. it's
That's
it's
so
so
funny.
painfully obvious. It's
I
so
know.
so we have to step away from this extractive worldview or view of business and start to see it as something that is self-reinforcing, that you're sort of creating an environment in which people thrive so that your business can thrive. And
Yes,
it's like,
yes, yes, right. I mean, it's just so
right.
funny because, like, Sonny Vanderbeek, a conscious capitalism private equity firm that I had on the show recently, like, the moment that your business shifts to, okay, we're going to optimize for stop buybacks, and antitrust, and like you're not providing value to the world. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, like, so the consumers, the people need to wake up and they need to buy shit. Going back to my technical explanations, they need to buy things so that way you, Mr. or Mrs. Entrepreneur, that has a $10 million sunglass company, can sell people more sunglasses. If they don't have
Yeah.
any money, they cannot buy $200 Ray-Bans.
Yeah, exactly.
Period. Like, and it's just so interesting. Where like this world of business has become world of high finance, and just juggling capital around, wrapped in things and selling it to other people. We're not truly bringing productivity to the economy, where people can make more money, business can make more money, and like, and I think the bridge of what you're talking about is the way to do this, where everybody makes more money. And that's like you
Yeah.
said, purely from a capitalist perspective, if you wanted this, you would treat everybody well, so everybody has more money, better lives, they buy more stuff, and business owners make more money.
Well, and and if there's any indication that we're not doing that right now, it's looking at Main Street and looking at Wall Street, and just the disconnect between the market and the quality of lives of the everyday individual. And it's not sustainable. It can't be sustained. And I think we as businesses need to be really invested in creating environments where we redistribute factors that contribute to the quality of people's lives: healthcare, paid time off, maybe childcare. I don't know, and money, frankly, capital, so that people can live and thrive. And it's not hard, and you can still build a highly profitable, lucrative business while
Mhm.
also paying my team above market, while also, creating all of these benefits and
Giving them
delivering a
good
great
lives, right?
product. Yeah, allowing them to build lives. But what it does also mean is that I have a limit on how much I'm going to extract and take for myself. But that's okay. How much do I need?
But
you
also,
know?
I'm gonna, yeah, I agreed. But also, I'm gonna say that you're referring probably to annual income, where
Yeah.
you're building a more valuable business. So you're technically, your wealth is generated, is
Oh,
growing.
absolutely.
So like there
Absolutely.
is a way to hold all of this in the same context. And I think
Yeah.
you layer on something like an ESOP or whatever, and we don't have to get too much into that, but there's
Mm.
also a way to harvest the value without gutting the company. So there
Yeah.
is truly, from start to finish, a way to accomplish all this. It just takes what you've been doing, which is being intentional, or hating the friction from the cognitive dissonance enough to just do what you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think at heart, I'm a problem solver. So if there's something out there that needs to be fixed, I'm generally oriented towards fixing it. And for me, that was fixing that friction, right? And I do really believe that small business in particular is the source of creating, thriving communities. And so how do we enable that? How do we build that? And it doesn't just have to be small businesses. And I think maybe even Loom is like quickly moving out of that category. But but creating these environments where communities are supported by the people who serve them with their products work. So I guess it's also thinking about yourself as in service to the people who are buying products from you. If you kind of have that servant leadership mentality, I think a lot of it falls out from that.
So if you are listening and you want to like move the needle one way, whether it's mindset or in your business, what would be kind of the first step you would suggest for the listeners?
What would be the first step? I think it's getting clear on what your intentions are, really identifying your goals and then working to optimize from those.
So like that's an easy bridge to the next question of what does intentional mean for you?
Oh man. I think being intentional is just being clear with yourself. Like when I think about when I'm living intentionally, it's me living true to my values and moving through life with that clarity. And sometimes when I fall out of that intentional space, I can again feel it. I feel the friction. I don't know that I've strayed, but I sense it through fatigue, through this underlying angstiness. So coming back to myself, coming back to my goals, coming back to my values and my vision are really these sort of anchors that allow me to move forward with intention. And the longer I stay out of alignment with that, the less, fulfilled I feel. And so bringing myself back to that center is really critically important for me. And I do that in like tiny ways, like having coffee quietly with myself every morning for 45 minutes before the family wakes up so that I can just
think.
think. Yeah, exactly.
Let's start with just basics. Think.
Basics. Yeah, before you jump into a day where everybody else's demands become the nature of your job, or your life. And so yeah, that would be
That's
my
awesome.
suggestion.
So you guys kick out a lot of great content because you're educating some very difficult areas of the world. What is the best place to find you more about Illum? And then you also guys did an awesome webinar. So I don't know where all this stuff resides.
Yeah. We have all of our content published on our website at www.advising.com. On there, you'll find all of the resources that we pulled together to respond to the energy sector around the pandemic and COVID-19, how to adapt in field, how to think about strategies for understanding your market when you can't actually go out and talk to people, which are probably useful across industries and sectors. And then we have a whole series on grappling with racial injustice and economic inequalities in our businesses and in our industry. So we take on issues of environmental justice and we take on issues of racial injustice and the histories of the energy industry and how it has and has not contributed to that, and to think through the solves. And that came out of a commitment from our leadership, from myself and Sarah, after George Floyd's murder, specifically in response to what I could feel were the expectations of my employees. And this is where I feel like you're in conversation enough, what your team demands of you. And so we committed to pushing our industry forward through a series of webinars that are also on our website.
Very, very tangible, very practical, again, you and I both being, quasi-economic junkies, and like the practical things you guys are talking about when you're talking about, the lack of investment and investing. This is all, again, tying, capitalism into the different areas. I mean, I very much enjoyed it.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it. I think you'll see threads of just really contending with like long policies and histories, but also thinking about things in reparative ways. How do we move forward intentionally to deal with these past wrongs? And I think that's also a really excellent role for businesses is reparative work as well. So I appreciate that. We also have a podcast, Ryan, that you'll just have to come be a part of. It's new. It's I would call it like the baby podcast compared to yours, but it's called Current. And so we talk about a lot of different issues.
Energy and what's going on with news.
Yeah, see all the plays. But we just had a really fun one for those of you who geek out on behavioral science, where we talk about choice and orchestrating choice and how you make pro-social decisions or environmentally positive decisions easier for the public through analogies like ice cream and tacos and burritos.
That's awesome.
And so it's really fun. You can check that out. That's both on Apple's sort of podcast as well as SoundCloud. And yeah, you can find everything you need to know. You can catch us on LinkedIn. We are kind of avoid Twitter, and but we do have an Instagram account as well. You can find us at.
And thank you so much for being gracious enough for coming on a second try.
No, it's fun. I hope it was as good as the first.
It was great.
But I am excited to connect with you again when you join me on Current, right? In a webinar. I think it would be great to have you and Pat share your insights with our industry. I think they would love that.